They found Master Chen's body at dawn, still seated at his writing desk with brush in hand. The final character on the scroll before him unfinished. A stroke that trailed off into nothing, as if death had claimed him mid-revelation. The magistrate ruled it natural causes, but I knew better. I had been there that night, hidden behind the silk screen, and I alone heard what the old poet confessed before the poison took him. Now, 30 years later, with soldiers approaching my door to silence the last voice that remembers, I must finally tell the story that has haunted me since I was 17 years old. My name is Mei Lin, and in the spring of my 17th year, I was apprenticed to Master Chen as a calligraphy student in the capital city of Chang'an. This was during the reign of Emperor Xuanzong, when the empire stretched vast and prosperous, when poetry and art flourished in every corner of the Forbidden City, and when the most celebrated poet in all the realm was not Master Chen, but his former friend and rival, the legendary Li Bai, the immortal of poetry himself. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me begin where all great tragedies begin, with love that was as pure as mountain snow before ambition stained it black. It was Master Chen himself who told me the story, piece by piece, during those final months of his life when age and illness made him melancholy and loose-tongued. I would prepare his ink, grind it carefully with water from the western lake, and he would speak while I worked. His hands would tremble as they held the brush, and his eyes would look past me into decades gone, seeing faces I had never known. 40 years before I ever knelt in his study, there were 3 young people in a small village along the Yellow River. Their names were Chen Tao, Li Bai, and Yun Xia. Chen and Li were both sons of minor merchants, neither wealthy nor poor, and both possessed a fierce intelligence and fiercer ambition. They studied together under the same master, learned the same texts, practiced the same forms of verse. They were brothers in all but blood, and Yun Xia was the daughter of a scholar who had fallen on hard times after criticizing a corrupt official. She was beautiful, yes. Master Chen's voice would soften when he spoke of her. But more than that, she possessed a mind that could match either of the young men word for word, poem for poem. In an era when most women were denied education, her father had taught her everything, making her perhaps the finest female scholar in the province. The 3 of them would meet by the river on summer evenings, beneath the willow trees whose branches swept the water like calligraphy brushes painting liquid silk. They would compose poems together, each trying to outdo the others, laughing when someone crafted a particularly clever couplet, groaning dramatically when someone's rhyme fell flat. They were young and brilliant, and the whole world seemed to stretch before them like an unwritten scroll. Both Chen and Li loved Yun Xia. This was understood between them, though never spoken. It added an edge to their competitions, a desperate quality to their verse. Each poem became a gift laid at her feet, each masterful line an argument for why she should choose its author. But Yun Xia, and here Master Chen's voice would grow thick with old grief, Yun Xia loved only Chen. She told him one evening as they sat alone by the river, Li having gone home early with a headache. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, and she took Chen's hand and said simply, "My heart chose you long ago. I have only been waiting for you to see it." Chen Tao was not a cruel man by nature. He did not wish to hurt his friend. So he and Yun Xia decided to wait before announcing their love, to find the right moment, the gentle way to help Li accept and move forward. It was a kindness that would prove fatal. Before they could speak, the imperial examinations were announced. Every 3 years, the emperor summoned the finest scholars in the land to the capital to compete for positions in the government. For young men like Chen and Li, this was the door to everything they had dreamed of: status, wealth, influence, the ability to shape the empire itself. They traveled to Chang'an together, Chen and Li, leaving Yun Xia behind with promises to return covered in glory. The journey took 3 weeks, and during that time, Chen tried several times to tell Li about Yun Xia, but the words caught in his throat. Li spoke so often of his own hopes, of how he would return to marry Yun Xia if he passed the examination, how he would give her the life of comfort her father's disgrace had stolen from her. How could Chen shatter those dreams while they were still on the road, while Li was already nervous and afraid of the trials ahead? So Chen remained silent and told himself he would speak after the examinations, when the pressure had passed. The examinations lasted 3 days. Candidates were locked in small cells with only a brush, ink, paper, and their own minds. They had to compose essays on the classics, write poetry on assigned themes, demonstrate their knowledge of history and law and philosophy. Thousands competed. Only a handful would achieve the highest ranks. Chen Tao and Li Bai both performed brilliantly. But there could be only one champion, one poet whose name would be spoken in the emperor's presence, one scholar who would be granted immediate appointment to a prestigious position. The judges deliberated for 2 days. When they finally emerged to announce the results, Chen Tao was named the champion. Li Bai placed third. Master Chen's hands always shook violently when he reached this part of the story. He would have to set down his brush, and I would wait in silence while he composed himself. Third place was still an honor. Li would still receive an appointment, still have a future. But it was not first place. And for someone like Li Bai, whose talent burned in him like a fever, whose poems had always come as easily as breathing, it was a devastating blow. To be surpassed by his closest friend, the one person he measured himself against, it poisoned something in him. Chen Tao found Li that night in a wine shop, already drunk, eyes red-rimmed but dry. Li embraced him, congratulated him with words that rang hollow, and together they drank until the stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere in that long, blurred night, with wine loosening his tongue and guilt gnawing at his heart, Chen finally told Li the truth about Yunsa. "She loves me," Chen said, the words tumbling out. "She told me before we left. I meant to tell you, brother. I swear I meant to tell you, but I never found the right moment. And I know this is a poor time now, but I cannot keep deceiving you." Li Bai sat very still. Then he poured himself another cup of wine, drank it down, and smiled. It was a smile Chen had never seen on his friend's face before, something that showed too many teeth and reached nowhere near his eyes. "How fortunate for you," Li said softly. "You win everything today." Then he stood and walked out into the night. And Chen, drunk and miserable and relieved that the truth was finally spoken, let him go. That was Chen Tao's first great mistake. He should have followed. He should have seen the darkness in that smile. Instead, Chen fell asleep at the wine-stained table, and when he woke, the morning sun was streaming through the windows, and his head pounded like a war drum. He stumbled back to the hostel where they were staying, expecting to find Li sleeping off his own hangover. But Li was not there. His belongings were gone, and on Chen's pillow was a single sheet of paper with a poem written in Li's distinctive hand. "The river flows, but not for me. The willow bends, but not in welcome. The friend I loved has taken all and left me with this truth. That talent means nothing, that brotherhood is illusion, that there is no justice, only victors and the defeated." Chen Tao searched the city for 3 days, but Li Bai had vanished like morning mist. Finally, worried about Yunsa, Chen began the long journey home. His heart was troubled, but he told himself that Li would recover, that time would heal the wound, that their friendship could be rebuilt. He was young enough to still believe in such things. He reached his village on an evening in early autumn when the first coolness was creeping into the air. The willow trees by the river were beginning to turn gold. He went first to Yunxia's house, eager to see her, to share his victory, to begin planning their life together. Her father answered the door. The old scholar's face was gray, haggard. When he saw Chen, something flickered in his eyes. Was it pity? Anger? Grief? "She is gone," Yunxia's father said. Chen did not understand. "Gone where? When will she return?" "She is married," the old man said. And his voice was flat, dead. "Li Bai came through here 2 weeks ago. He told her you had been killed by bandits on the road. He showed her your jade pendant, said he had recovered it from your body. My daughter she was destroyed by grief. Li stayed to comfort her. He was very kind, very attentive. He said he would honor you by caring for the woman you had loved." And Yunxia, in her sorrow, agreed to marry him. They left for the capital 5 days ago. The world tilted beneath Chen's feet. His jade pendant. He reached for his neck and found it gone. Li must have stolen it that night at the wine shop, while Chen slept in his drunken stupor. But I am alive, Chen said stupidly. I am here. The old scholar looked at him with infinite sadness. Yes, he said, you are. Then he closed the door, and Chen was left standing in the twilight, his victory turned to ashes in his mouth, his friend revealed as a traitor, and the woman he loved stolen away by a lie. Master Chen's voice would crack when he reached this point in the story, even 40 years later, even as an old man facing death. The wound had never healed. It had only calcified, turning his heart to stone. What followed was a decade of pursuing ghosts. Chen returned to Chang'an and took up his government position, but his heart was not in it. He made inquiries, tried to find where Li and Yunxia had gone, but Li Bai had turned down his appointment. Instead, he had taken Yunxia and disappeared into the vastness of the empire. For 10 years, Chen heard nothing. He threw himself into his work, rose through the ranks of the bureaucracy, earned commendations for his administrative skill. But his poetry, the poetry that had won him the championship, dried up. He could not write. Every time he took up a brush, he saw Yunxia's face, heard Li's soft voice saying, "You win everything today," and the words would not come. Then, in the 10th year after the examination, Chen was appointed magistrate of a river district far to the south. It was considered a prestigious position, governing a wealthy area known for its silk production and merchant trade. Chen traveled there with a retinue of servants and officials, determined to at least excel at his duties since his art had abandoned him. On his 3rd day in his new post, a woman came to petition him. She wore the simple clothes of a merchant's wife, but they were worn and patched. Her face was veiled, as was proper. She knelt before his bench and said in a voice like broken glass, "I seek divorce from my husband on grounds of cruelty and deception." Chen granted her permission to state her case. She began to speak, and with her first words, he recognized her voice. Yunxia, his hands clenched on the arms of his chair. He wanted to tear away her veil, to shout her name, to demand explanations, but he was a magistrate, and she had not acknowledged him, so he forced himself to remain still and listen. She told a story that mirrored and inverted everything he knew. She told of how Li Bai had brought her to the capital, and how, within a month of their marriage, she had seen Chen Tao walking in the market square, alive and whole. She had run to him, but he had not seen her in the crowd, and she had lost him in the press of people. That night, she confronted Li. He did not deny his deception. Instead, he told her that Chen had willingly given him the jade pendant, that Chen had been so eager to celebrate his victory that he had forgotten his promises to her, that Chen had laughed about the provincial girl he had left behind. "He said you never loved me," Yunxia said to the magistrate, who was Chen, her voice hollow. "He said it had all been a game to you, a way to pass time before you came to the capital to seek your fortune, and I did not know what to believe. So I demanded we return to my village, that I would speak to you myself." Li agreed. We began preparations to travel. Then Yunxia told how, the night before they were to leave, she had suddenly fallen violently ill. A physician was summoned, and he confirmed what she had secretly suspected for a week. She was pregnant. The journey would be dangerous. They must wait. By the time she recovered enough to travel, she was beginning to show. Li convinced her that Chen would never accept another man's child, that it would be cruel to burden him with such a thing, that she owed it to her child to remain with its father, and so she had stayed. The child was born, a daughter, and Li Bai, his 3rd place finish having closed governmental doors, turned his energy toward poetry. He wrote constantly, brilliantly, with a fever that seemed almost supernatural. His verses began to circulate in the capital. Officials quoted him at banquets. Scholars memorized his lines, but success did not make him kind. The fame that grew around him, the recognition he craves, seemed only to feed something dark inside him. He drank heavily and grew erratic. When his poems were praised, he would preen like a peacock. When they were criticized, his rage was terrible, and he blamed Yunxia for everything. When he was drunk, he would scream at her that she was the reason he had not achieved his rightful position, that she had been the distraction that made him place 3rd. that her love for Chen had cursed him. He accused her of still pining for that mediocre hack who stole my glory. The beatings started 2 years after their daughter was born. Yunxia endured them silently, for where could she go? She had no money, no family who could take her in. Her father had died while she was in the capital, and she had a child to protect. But recently, Li's violence had turned toward their daughter as well. The girl was 8 years old now, and she had inherited her father's gift for verse. When Li discovered her composing poems, he had beaten her and screamed that she was not to write, that poetry was his domain alone, that he would not tolerate competition even from a child. That was when I knew I must leave, Yunxia said to the magistrate. Whatever I have suffered, I could bear, but I cannot watch him destroy our daughter. So I come before you, honored magistrate, and beg for justice. Chen sat behind his bench, his heart a cacophony of competing agonies. She did not know it was him. The official robes, the hat, the position, she saw only the magistrate, not the man she had loved. Should he reveal himself? What purpose would it serve? Where is your husband now? Chen asked, fighting to keep his voice level. He has gone to the provincial capital for a poetry competition. He will return in 3 days. 3 days, Chen made his decision. I grant your petition, he said formally. Your marriage is dissolved. You will be given funds from the district treasury to establish yourself and your daughter in safety. I will have your belongings removed from your house today. By the time your former husband returns, you will be gone. Yunxia collapsed forward, pressing her forehead to the floor. Thank you, honored magistrate. Thank you. She left without ever knowing who had saved her. Chen told himself it was better this way. What could they be to each other now, after everything? He was no longer the young poet who had courted her by the river. She was no longer the scholar's daughter who had chosen him. They were both ruins of those people, haunted by the same ghost. But that night, Chen wrote poetry for the first time in 10 years. It poured out of him like blood from a wound. All the grief and rage and love he had locked away. He wrote about betrayal and loss, about injustice and the bitter taste of victory that comes too late. He wrote until his hand cramped and the candles burned to nubs. The next day, he learned where Yunxia and her daughter were staying and sent an anonymous gift. A jade pendant, a river stone worn smooth, and a small book of poems. Not the poems he had written last night, but older ones. Poems from when they were young. Poems she would remember. No name was attached, but she would know. 3 days later, Li Bai returned to find his house empty and his wife and daughter gone. He went immediately to the magistrate, demanding justice, demanding his property be returned. Chen Tao received him formally in the full regalia of his office. Li had changed. His face was ravaged by drink and dissipation, his eyes bloodshot, his robes expensive but stained. But when he spoke, his voice still carried that liquid beauty, the voice of a natural poet. My wife has been stolen from me, Li said, bowing properly but with anger simmering beneath the courtesy. She has taken my daughter and my possessions. I demand you find them and return them to me. Your wife has been granted a divorce, Chen said calmly. There is no theft, only a legal dissolution of marriage. Li's eyes narrowed. On what grounds? I am a respected poet. I have committed no crime. On grounds of cruelty. She testified to beatings and abuse, both of herself and your daughter. She lies, Li's voice rose. She is an ungrateful woman who wishes to shame me. You cannot believe the word of a bitter deceptive. I believe her, Chen said, and he allowed his voice to drop its formal tone, to become simply the voice of Chen Tao. Li stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the magistrate more carefully, and Chen saw the moment recognition dawned. The color drained from Li's face. Chen, Li whispered. Hello, old friend. They stared at each other across the space of the court. Across 10 years of silence, across the ruins of brotherhood. You stole my wife, Chen said softly. You lied to her, told her I was dead, used her grief to manipulate her into marriage, and now you dare come before me demanding justice. Li's face twisted through several expressions, shame, defiance, anger, finally settling on a kind of desperate pride. You stole my glory, he hissed. You, with your plodding, careful verses, your methodical studying. You had no right to defeat me. Poetry is my life, my soul. It is all I am, and you took it from me. I took nothing. I wrote better poems that day. You wrote adequate poems, Li spat. I wrote brilliance. But the judges were old men who valued technical skill over true genius. They could not see, they could not understand. You placed third because you were third best, Chen said. And he was surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Your talent is immense, Li Bai. No one denies that. You have become famous for your poetry, just as you always dreamed. But your talent does not excuse your cruelty. It does not justify what you did to Yunsha, to me, to your own daughter. Li Bai's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Chen thought he might lunge across the court. But then Li laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think you have won, Li said. You think you have taken everything from me now, as I once took from you. But you are wrong, Chen Tao. You have given me the greatest gift a poet can receive. What gift is that? Suffering, Li said. And his smile was terrible. True, deep, exquisite suffering. And from suffering comes the most profound art. I will write such poems about this that the empire will weep. I will be remembered for 1,000 years, while you will be forgotten, a nameless magistrate in a nameless district. So thank you, old friend. Thank you for this. He bowed mockingly and turned to leave. Li Bai, Chen called after him. Li paused in the doorway. If you ever come near Yunxia or your daughter again, I will have you arrested and flogged. I am a magistrate. I have that power, and I will use it. Li looked back over his shoulder. I do not want them anymore. They are yours if you wish. I have what I need. Then he walked out, and that was the last time Chen Tao saw Li Bai in person, though not the last time their lives would intersect. Master Chen paused here in his telling, and I would bring him tea, strong and bitter. His hands would wrap around the warm cup, and he would stare into the steam as if seeing faces there. I do not know if I made the right choice in what came next, he would say. I have spent 30 years questioning it. What came next was this. Chen Tao went to Yunxia. He revealed himself, told her everything, how Li had lied, how he had spent 10 years searching for her, how he had never stopped loving her. They sat in the small room he had secured for her, her daughter playing quietly in the corner, and Yunxia wept. She wept for the years they had lost, for the innocence that could never be recovered, for the people they had been and would never be again. I thought you were dead, she said. I mourned you, and when I learned you were alive, I thought you had betrayed me. And then I was trapped, carrying Li's child, and every day I thought of you and wondered if he had lied about that too, but I could not escape to find out. And now, here you are, and I feel like I'm looking at a ghost. I feel the same, Chen admitted. You are not the girl I loved by the river. I am not the boy you chose. No, she agreed. We are not. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Yunxia said, but perhaps we could learn to be something new. Perhaps we could find out who we are now, and see if those people might also love each other. So they tried. It was not the romance of their youth. That was dead and buried, killed by Li Bai's betrayal. But they built something else, something quieter and more resilient. Chen helped Yunxia establish a small business selling silk. He visited regularly, but did not pressure her to marry again immediately. He brought gifts for her daughter, who was shy and serious, and wrote poems in secret that she showed only to her mother. Slowly, carefully, over the course of 2 years, they rebuilt trust. They walked by the river and talked about philosophy and poetry. They shared meals. They laughed sometimes, though the laughter was always tinged with an awareness of all they had lost. And finally, one spring evening, Yunxia took Chen's hand, as she had once before, 40 years ago, and said, I think I could marry you now, not as the girl who loved you once, but as the woman I am today, if you still wish it. Chen did wish it. They married quietly, without ceremony, and Chen formally adopted Yunxia's daughter. They were happy, or as happy as people can be when living in the shadow of old wounds. Chen wrote poetry again, though he never tried to match his earlier success. He was content to be a magistrate, to serve his district well, to come home to a wife and daughter who loved him, and for 10 years, they heard nothing of Li Bai. Then the poems began to appear. They were published anonymously at first, circulating in the capital, copied by scholars and students. They were brilliant. Everyone agreed on that. They spoke of betrayal and loss, of friendship broken, of love stolen. They painted Chen Tao as a conniving thief who had used his mediocre political skills to seduce judges and steal a victory that rightfully belonged to another. At first, Chen ignored them. They did not name him directly, and he cared nothing for reputation. But then the poems became more pointed, more vicious. They named Yunxia as an unfaithful wife who had abandoned her husband and daughter out of greed for a wealthier man. They described Chen's daughter in cruel terms, calling her a bastard who pretended a talent she did not possess. The poems wounded Yunxia deeply. Worse, other scholars began to respond with their own poems, some defending Li Bai, others attacking him, creating a literary war that spread across the empire. And through it all, Li Bai remained hidden, anonymous, untouchable. Chen's daughter, she was 15 now, began to withdraw. The other children mocked her, calling her the bastard from the poems. She stopped writing poetry altogether, even in secret. Chen would find her sometimes staring out the window, her face blank, and when he asked what she was thinking, she would only say, "Nothing, father, I am thinking nothing." Yunxia's health began to fail. The physicians said it was a weakness of the heart, but Chen knew better. It was grief, eating her from the inside. She had endured so much, her father's disgrace, her first love's supposed death, her first husband's cruelty, and now this public shaming that followed her everywhere. She died on a winter night, quietly, in her sleep. Chen woke to find her cold beside him. Her face was peaceful, and he found himself grateful that at least her suffering was over. But his was not. At Yunxia's funeral, a messenger arrived with a package for Chen. Inside was a book of poems, newly published, bound in expensive silk, with Li Bai's name emblazoned on the cover. The poems were all the ones that had circulated anonymously, now collected and officially attributed. And in the front of the book was a dedication, "To my friend Chen Tao, who taught me what loss truly means." Chen read the book that night, every word, even though each line was like a knife, and he had to admit, despite everything, that they were magnificent. Li Bai had taken their shared pain and transmuted it into art of the highest order. These poems would survive for generations. They would be studied and memorized and celebrated, and they would forever paint Chen Tao as a villain. Master Chen's voice would become almost inaudible when he reached this part of the story. I would have to lean close to hear him, my ear near his lips as he whispered the words that had poisoned his life. Chen Tao could have responded with poems of his own, telling the true story, but he was no longer a poet. His art had died with Yunxia. He could have used his position to attack Li Bai publicly, but what proof did he have? It would look like the spiteful revenge of a lesser talent against a genius. So Chen did nothing. He raised his daughter, performed his duties, and let the poems stand unchallenged. His daughter never knew that the cruel verses that had driven her mother to an early grave were written by her biological father. Chen never told her. What would be the point? The years passed. Chen's daughter married and moved away. Chen was promoted to higher positions, eventually retiring to the capital to live out his final years. Li Bai became the most celebrated poet in the empire, his verses studied in every school, his name spoken with reverence. And then, 1 year before I entered Master Chen's service, Li Bai died. He drowned, some said while drunk, trying to embrace the reflection of the moon in a river, which was such a perfectly poetic death that no one questioned it. He was given a state funeral. The emperor himself composed a eulogy. Master Chen attended the funeral. He stood in the back of the crowd and watched as the empire mourned the man who had destroyed his life. He listened to scholars praise Li Bai's genius, his profound understanding of human nature, his ability to transform suffering into transcendent art. No one mentioned his cruelty. No one spoke of the wife he had beaten or the daughter he had abandoned. Those facts were erased, papered over by the glory of his verse. After the funeral, Master Chen went to Li Bai's home, where his effects were being sorted. He asked to see Li Bai's private papers. As a retired official and noted scholar himself, the request was granted. He was led to a study piled high with manuscripts and scrolls. And there, in a locked chest that the servants had not yet opened, Master Chen found Li Bai's true final work. It was a long manuscript, half journal and half confession, written in the months before his death. Li Bai had been dying, not suddenly but slowly, from a disease of the liver that the physicians said was caused by his years of heavy drinking. Knowing death was approaching, Li Bai had written the truth. All of it, the jade pendant he had stolen, the lie he had told Yunsha, the deliberate manipulation and abuse, the poems written not from genuine suffering, but from calculated malice, designed to wound Chen Tao and burnish his own reputation. I wonder sometimes, Li Bai had written in a shaking hand near the end. If I ever truly loved anything but poetry, I think perhaps I did not. I think perhaps I was hollow from the beginning, and everything I did, every cruelty, every betrayal, was in service to the art. Does that make it justified? Does great beauty excuse great evil? I do not know. But I know that I am dying, and I am afraid, because I suspect that history will remember me kindly while condemning those I harmed. And I find I cannot bear the weight of that injustice, even as I lack the courage to correct it. The manuscript ended there, unfinished. Li Bai had not published it, had not shared it. He had locked it away, leaving the decision of what to do with it to whoever found it. Master Chen found it, and Master Chen read it, and then Master Chen stole it. He took the manuscript and hid it in his robes, and he left Li Bai's house without telling anyone what he had discovered. The servants locked the chest again, never knowing its most important contents were gone. For a year, Master Chen kept the manuscript hidden. He told no one about it. He could have published it, could have vindicated himself and Yunxia, could have shown the world what Li Bai truly was. But he did not. And when I asked him why, in those final months of his life when he showed me the manuscript and told me this entire terrible story, he said something that haunts me still. Because Li Bai was right, great art does survive. His poems are beautiful, and they will be remembered long after we are all dust. If I revealed the truth, I would diminish that beauty. I would make the empire question every line, see the cruelty behind every image. And I found to my shame that I could not do it. Because I loved poetry once, Mei Lin. I loved it as much as Li Bai did, before he killed that love in me. And I could not bring myself to destroy something so beautiful, even to clear my own name. But that is unjust, I protested. I was young and still believed in justice. The world should know the truth. The world does not care about truth, Master Chen said tiredly. It cares about beauty. And Li Bai, for all his monstrosity, created beauty that will outlive us all. That conversation happened in the late autumn of Master Chen's final year. His health was failing rapidly. The physician said his heart was weak. I think like Yunxia. He was simply tired of carrying grief. One evening in early winter, as I was preparing his ink, he suddenly said, Mei Lin, I am going to tell you where I have hidden Li Bai's manuscript, and I am going to ask you to make a choice that I could not. He told me of a loose brick in the eastern wall of his garden, where the manuscript was sealed in a waterproof leather case. He told me that after his death, I could do with it what I wished, publish it or burn it, reveal the truth or let the beautiful lie persist. Why me? I asked, trembling. Because you are young, he said. Because you still believe in justice. And because you must learn, as I learned, that sometimes there is no just choice. Sometimes there is only the burden of knowing, and the weight of deciding what to do with that knowledge. That was the night he died. I prepared his ink as always, and he began to write a poem. It was the first poem he had written in years, and it was about the river where he had met Yunxia so long ago, about the willows and the young voices calling to each other across the water. It was beautiful in its simplicity, in its aching nostalgia for a time before everything went wrong. He never finished it. His brush trailed off mid-character, and when I came around the screen to see why he had stopped, I found him still seated, still holding the brush, but gone. His eyes were open and peaceful, as if he had finally found the ending he was searching for. I reported his death. The magistrate came, examined the scene, declared it natural causes. Master Chen was given a modest funeral, befitting a retired official and scholar. Some of his old students attended, and a few colleagues. No one from his family, his daughter, was ill and could not travel. It was a quiet death for a quiet man who had lived in the shadow of someone else's legend. And then came the choice he had left me. I went to the garden and found the loose brick. Inside was the manuscript, exactly as he had described. I read it again, all of Li-Bai's confessions, all the truth that had been hidden. For 3 days, I did not know what to do. I am a woman, and young. Who would believe me if I tried to publish such a thing? It would be dismissed as a forgery, a spiteful attack on a beloved national poet by an unknown girl. I had no proof, no witnesses, no authority, but I could not bring myself to burn it either. Because Master Chen was right, it was unjust that the world should remember Li-Bai as a hero and Master Chen as a villain. Or worse, not remember him at all. So I made a third choice. I hid the manuscript again, in a new location, and I wrote down everything Master Chen had told me. I wrote this story, the full and true account, and I attached Li-Bai's manuscript to it as evidence, and I sealed them both away, with instruction that they should be opened and published 50 years after Master Chen's death. 50 years. Long enough that everyone involved would be dead. Long enough that the revelation could not hurt anyone still living, but not so long that the truth would be lost forever. I thought I was being wise. I thought I had found the just solution. I did not anticipate that there would be people who wanted the manuscript to stay hidden. I did not anticipate that Li-Bai's admirers, powerful scholars and officials who had built their own reputations on their associations with his work, would learn of its existence and see it as a threat. I do not know how they found out. Perhaps one of Master Chen's servants saw me take the manuscript from the garden and reported it. Perhaps someone had been watching the house all along, waiting to see if the truth would emerge. But 3 months after Master Chen's death, men came to my door in the night. They called themselves scholars, but they had the eyes of soldiers. They asked me politely, then less politely, about any papers Master Chen might have left behind. They said they were compiling his works for publication, honoring his memory. I lied and said there was nothing. They searched my rooms but found nothing. I had hidden the documents well. They left with warnings that I should contact them if I remembered anything. A week later, my landlord told me I had to leave. He would not say why, but I saw fear in his eyes. Someone had gotten to him. I moved to a smaller room in a poorer district. The men found me again within a month. This time they were less polite. They said there were rumors of a manuscript, of dangerous lies about Li-Bai. They said that spreading such lies would be treason against his memory, against the empire itself. They said I would be shown mercy if I cooperated. I continued to deny everything, and they left again, but I knew it was only a matter of time. They would keep pressing, keep searching. Eventually, they would find the manuscript, or they would silence me to ensure their own version of history remained unchallenged. So I made my final choice. I removed the manuscript from its hiding place. I carried it with me as I fled to the mountains, to a remote monastery where I had heard they kept libraries of rare texts. The monks there are sworn to preserve knowledge, regardless of its nature. I gave them the manuscript and this written testimony. I asked them to keep it secret for 50 years, as I had originally planned, and then to release it to the world. The abbot, an old man with eyes that had seen much, agreed. He said truth has its own time, and that the monastery would protect this truth until its time came. That was 2 days ago. And now I sit in a small room in an inn at the base of the mountain, writing these final words by candlelight, because I can hear the horses outside. They have found me one last time. There is knocking at the door, insistent, commanding. A voice calls my name and demands I open. I am not afraid, or at least, I am less afraid than I thought I would be. I have done what Master Chen asked of me. I have ensured that the truth will survive, even if I do not. The manuscript is safe. This testimony is complete. Perhaps they will kill me, or perhaps they will simply make me disappear into some prison where no one will hear my story. Either way, I will become what Master Chen was, the last person who knew the truth, now silenced. But silence is not the same as forgetting. The manuscript remains. The truth remains. And in 50 years, when everyone who wanted it hidden is dead. When there is no more reason for lies, the monks will open their archives, and the world will finally see Li Bai whole, both his genius and his cruelty, his beauty and his monstrosity. The knocking has stopped. I hear the door to the inn opening downstairs, heavy footsteps on the stairs. I find myself thinking of Master Chen's unfinished poem, that last character trailing off into nothing. Perhaps that is how all true stories end, not with resolution, but with an ellipsis, a silence that suggests more than it says. I think of the river where 3 young people once sat beneath willow trees, composing verses and believing the world was wide enough for all their dreams. I think of how wrong they were, and how right, and how perhaps it does not matter which, because the river keeps flowing regardless, and the willows keep bending, and somewhere, always, there are young voices calling to each other across the water, not knowing what awaits them. The footsteps have reached my floor. Someone is trying the handle of my door. I set down my brush. The ink is still wet on this final page, but there is no more time. I must hide these papers now, slip them under the floorboard where I have prepared a space, and then face whatever comes next. Master Chen asked me to choose between justice and beauty. In the end, I chose both. Or neither, or perhaps something in between. I chose truth, which is its own kind of beauty and its own kind of justice, even if it comes too late to save anyone. The door is opening. I am ready. The door opened, and I met my fate with eyes wide open. But it was not soldiers who entered. It was a woman, perhaps 30 years of age, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, but the eyes of someone who had learned to hide it. She wore the simple robes of a merchant, but the fabric was too fine, the cut too precise. She looked at me kneeling by the floorboard with my papers scattered around me, and her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something like resignation. "Mei Lin," she said. It was not a question. I said nothing. My hand was still on the loose board, the manuscript and testimony hidden beneath. She closed the door behind her and stood with her back against it, as if to prevent anyone else from entering. "My name is Li Mingju," she said. "I am the daughter of Li Bai and Yunxia. I believe you knew my mother." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. This was Master Chen's daughter, the girl he had adopted and raised as his own. The woman Li Bai had called a bastard in his poems, even though she was his own child. "I am not here with the men who have been hunting you," she said quickly, seeing my fear. "I followed them because I needed to reach you first. Mei Lin, I know about the manuscript. I know what you are trying to do, and I am here to tell you that you must not." "You want to protect your father's memory," I said bitterly, even knowing what he was. "I want to protect my mother's memory," she corrected, "and my father's, my true father's. Chen Tao, the man who raised me." She moved further into the room, and in the candlelight I could see the strain on her face, the sleepless nights etched beneath her eyes. "Please," she said, "let me explain. Then you can make your choice with full knowledge, which is more than anyone gave to my parents." I gestured for her to sit. She folded herself gracefully onto the floor across from me, and I pressed the floorboard back into place, hiding the papers beneath. Not from her, I sensed she truly meant me no harm, but from whoever else might come. "I learned the truth 5 years ago," Li Mingju began. "My father, Chen Tao, was dying. He knew he had little time, and he called me to his bedside. He told me everything. About Li Bai, about my mother, about the stolen jade pendant and the lies. He told me about Li Bai's confession and how he had taken it and hidden it. He told me he had given the burden of that knowledge to his student, a young woman named Mei Lin." She paused, her hands folding and unfolding in her lap. "He asked me to find you after his death, to beg you not to publish the manuscript, not to burn it either, but to keep it hidden forever. He said he had made a mistake in passing the burden to you, that it was not fair to ask you to carry what he himself could not bear to resolve." "Why did you not come to me sooner?" I asked. "Because I did not know if I agreed with him," she said simply. "For 5 years, I have thought about nothing else. I have read all of Li Bai's poems, studied them, tried to understand the man who sired me. I have read my father's few surviving poems, seen the gentleness in them, the quiet dignity. and I have asked myself which legacy deserves to survive. And you decided? I decided that the question itself is wrong, she said. Because it is not about which legacy deserves to survive. Both men are dead. They no longer suffer or benefit from the world's opinion. The question is, who is hurt by the truth, and who is hurt by the lie? I leaned forward, drawn despite myself into the puzzle she was presenting. Who then? The lie hurts you, she said. It hurts everyone who knew my parents and saw what truly happened. It hurts the cause of justice itself, because it rewards cruelty and punishes kindness. But the truth hurts everyone who has built their lives on Li Bai's poetry. They do not deserve protection, I said. They chose to admire a monster. They chose to admire beautiful words, she corrected. Most of them never knew Li Bai. They never saw him beat my mother or abandon me. They only saw his poems, and they loved those poems, and those poems gave them comfort and joy and inspiration. Are they to blame for not seeing what was hidden from them? Yes, I said, though the word came out less certainly than I intended. Li Mingzhu smiled sadly. Perhaps, but there is more. There are people, thousands of them, who have built their scholarly careers on interpreting Li Bai's work. Teachers who have devoted their lives to explaining his imagery. Students who have memorized every line. Officials who have gained their positions partly through demonstrating their knowledge of his verse. If the truth emerges, all of that is tainted. Not destroyed, perhaps, but forever complicated. Every interpretation must now account for the cruelty of the author. Every beautiful line must be weighed against the evil of the hand that wrote it. Good, I said. That is how it should be. And what of the poems themselves, she asked. Do they become less beautiful because we know their source? If a monster writes a perfect line about moonlight on water, is the image less true? Is the moon less bright? You sound like Master Chen, I said, and it was almost an accusation. I am his daughter, she replied. He raised me to think carefully about justice and mercy, about truth and beauty. He gave me the tools to wrestle with this question. And I have wrestled with it for 5 years, Mei Lin. 5 years of sleepless nights and endless debates with myself. And I have come to a conclusion, though it sits uneasily in my heart. She took a breath, and I saw her hands steady themselves, as if she were preparing to write a difficult character. I believe the manuscript should remain hidden. Not forever, perhaps, but for now, for another generation at least. Let those who love Li Bai's poetry die in their innocence. Let the teachers and students finish their work unburdened by knowledge that would poison every insight they gained. And then, when enough time has passed that the revelation will be historical rather than personal, let the truth emerge. That is cowardice, I said. That is choosing comfort over justice. Yes, she agreed. It is both those things, but it is also mercy. And mercy, my father taught me, is sometimes a higher virtue than justice. Master Chen also taught me, I said hotly, that I should make my own choice, that I should carry the burden of knowledge and decide what to do with it. And I have decided. I have given the manuscript to the monks to preserve and publish in 50 years. That is mercy enough. 50 years of protecting the feelings of those who loved a monster. Li Mingzhu's face fell. The monks, she said. Mei Lin, that is why the soldiers are coming. That is why they have hunted you so relentlessly. There are powerful people, disciples of Li Bai, officials who have built their legitimacy on association with his genius, who will not tolerate the manuscript's existence, even hidden away for 50 years. They fear that it will eventually emerge, and they have decided that the only solution is to destroy it and silence anyone who knows of it. Let them try, I said. The monastery is well defended. The monks are sworn to protect knowledge. The monks are holy men, she said gently. They will not fight soldiers, and the men who are coming are not merely scholars with influence. They have the backing of the provincial governor, who was granted his position partly on the strength of his published commentaries on Li Bai's work. If that work is discredited, his authority crumbles. He will do whatever is necessary to prevent that. Cold fear settled into my stomach. Then what do you suggest? Should I simply hand over the manuscript to be burned? No, she said. I suggest a third path, one that neither my father nor you have considered. I suggest we use the manuscript as Li Bai himself would have, as a tool, a weapon, a means to an end. I stared at her. Explain. She leaned forward, and in the candlelight, her face took on the same intensity I had seen in Master Chen when he spoke of his art. The governor and his allies fear the manuscript because it threatens their power, but they also cannot afford to let it be known that such a manuscript exists and that they destroyed it. That would raise questions, create doubts, so they pursue you quietly, trying to recover it before anyone else learns of its existence. Yes, I said. And if the manuscript were to become public knowledge, if we were to announce its existence widely, to tell everyone that it exists and what it contains, then destroying it would do them no good. The doubt would already be planted. People would wonder if the claims were true. Scholars would debate it endlessly. The power of the manuscript is not merely in its words, but in its potential. Once that potential is acknowledged, it cannot be unacknowledged. I began to understand. You want to use the threat of publication to force them to leave us alone. More than that, she said. I want to use it to force them to do good. Think, Mei Lin. What does the governor fear? That Li Bai's legacy will be destroyed. What does he value? Power, position, the respect of scholars. What if we offered him a compromise? We keep the manuscript hidden, truly hidden, not merely delayed, and in exchange, he uses his power and position to correct some of the lies Li Bai spread. What do you mean? My father, Chen Tao, is remembered as a footnote, if he is remembered at all. A minor poet who won a single competition through luck or political maneuvering. But he was more than that. He was a skilled administrator, a just magistrate, a devoted father. What if the governor were to commission a proper biography, to collect my father's surviving poems and publish them with full scholarly apparatus, to restore his reputation not by tearing down Li Bai, but by building up the truth of who Chen Tao was? That would not be justice, I said. Li Bai's crimes would still be hidden. But my father's virtues would be revealed, she countered, and my mother's suffering would be acknowledged, at least in part. The biography could mention that she was married first to another man, that the marriage was unhappy, that she found peace and love with Chen Tao. Not the full truth, but not the complete lie either. A middle path, I shook my head. The governor would never agree. Why would he help us when he could simply kill us and take the manuscript? Because we would not keep the only copy, she said. We would make duplicates, hide them with trusted people, with instructions to publish if anything happens to us. The governor is not a stupid man. He knows that martyrs are more dangerous than living compromisers. If we offer him a path to preserve Li Bai's legacy, while also serving the truth in a smaller way, he may take it. Mei, I said, you are gambling with our lives on Mei. We are already gambling with our lives, she pointed out. You have been running for months. I have been living in fear that the men who hunt you will decide I know too much and come for me as well. At least this gamble offers something in return, a chance to honor my father's memory, to give my mother's suffering some meaning, to ensure that not everything Li Bai touched turns to poison. I was silent for a long moment, thinking. The candle had burned low, and shadows danced on the walls, like the ghosts of all the people whose choices had led to this moment. Yunjia and Chen Tao and Li Bai, all dead but still shaping the world through the echoes of their actions. And now Li Mingju and I, two women with no power except the knowledge we carried, trying to find a path between justice and survival. There is something you are not telling me, I said finally. Some reason beyond strategy why you want this compromise. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. You are perceptive, she said. Yes, there is another reason. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small book, bound in simple cloth. This is my daughter's poetry collection, she said. She is 12 years old, and she has her grandfather's gift. Both grandfathers, I suppose. She writes constantly, beautiful verses that make my heart ache. She wants to study poetry formally, to perhaps one day take the examinations and serve in the government literary bureau. Women cannot take the examinations, I said. Not yet, she agreed, but the world is changing slowly. There are whispers that perhaps in another generation, women of sufficient talent might be allowed to participate. and my daughter has that talent. But if Li Bai's legacy is destroyed, if poetry itself becomes suspect because the greatest poet of the age was revealed as a monster, then those small steps toward change will be reversed. The conservatives will say, see, this is what comes of elevating art above morality. We must return to rigid rules, to strict controls. And my daughter's dreams will die before they can even properly begin. So you would protect a monster's legacy for your daughter's sake, I said. I would protect the idea that poetry matters, she said, that art has value, that beauty is worth preserving, not because Li Bai deserves it, but because my daughter does. Because all the young poets who come after deserve to live in a world where their art is respected, not tainted by association with an evil man. I understood then. This was not about justice or mercy or truth or lies. This was about the future. This was about what kind of world we would leave for those who came after us. If we do this, I said slowly, if we make this bargain with the governor, what becomes of the manuscript itself? We keep it, she said. We hide it securely and we pass it down. You to your student, me to my daughter, they to theirs. A secret trust held in reserve. If Li Bai's admirers ever try to elevate him too high, to make him a saint instead of a man, then we have the weapon to strike them down. The manuscript becomes not a revelation but a deterrent. Its power lies in remaining hidden, but known to exist. That is a terrible burden, I said, to carry such knowledge across generations. Yes, she agreed. But is it worse than the burden of revealing it? Master Chen could not decide. You tried to find a middle way by delaying revelation. I am proposing we delay it indefinitely, but use its existence to force small goods in the present. None of these choices is without cost. We can only choose which cost we are willing to pay. The candle guttered and went out, leaving us in darkness. I sat very still, feeling the weight of the manuscript beneath the floorboard, the weight of Li Mingju's proposition, the weight of all the choices that had led to this moment. From outside, I heard horses. The soldiers had arrived. We need to decide now, Li Mingju whispered urgently. They will be at this door in moments. Do we run? Do we fight? Do we negotiate? Mei Lin, what do you choose? I thought of Master Chen, brush in hand, trailing off mid-character. I thought of the poem about the river and the willow trees, about young voices calling to each other across water. I thought about how he had said there is no just choice sometimes, only the burden of knowing. And I thought about Li Mingju's daughter, 12 years old and dreaming of poetry, living in a world we were shaping right now with our decisions. We negotiate, I said, but not with the governor, with someone higher. What do you mean? I pulled up the floorboard and retrieved the manuscript. In the darkness, I held it against my chest, feeling the pages that had caused so much suffering and fear. The governor is afraid of this because it threatens his position, but there are others in the empire who might welcome such a threat. Rival officials, Li Mingju breathed. You want to auction it to the highest bidder. No, I said. I want to give it to someone who will use it wisely. Someone who values truth but also understands power. Someone who might be willing to make the changes we seek, not as a compromise, but as an act of justice. Do you know such a person? I know of one, I said. The Emperor's third minister of rights. He is known as a reformer, someone who wants to open the examinations to a wider pool of candidates. He has argued for allowing women of exceptional talent to study in the imperial academies, and he is also an enemy of the provincial governor, Li Mingju finished. Yes, I have heard the same. They represent different factions at court. If we give him leverage over the governor, he might use it to force the reforms we want, I said, and in exchange, we give him the manuscript to do with as he sees wise. Not to publish, probably. He would understand the dangers. But to hold as we would hold it. As a deterrent, a check on those who would elevate Li Bai to sainthood. Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. We had moments at most. How do we reach this minister? Li Mingju asked. We cannot simply walk into the capital and request an audience. No, I agreed. But we can write to him. Tell him what we have, what we know, and what we offer. And we can send copies of our letter to several of his known allies, so that even if one message is intercepted, others will get through. And until then, the footsteps had reached our floor. I could hear men's voices, arguing about which room I was in. Until then, we run, I said. and we trust that the manuscript's existence is protection enough. They will not kill us if they think the manuscript is hidden somewhere they cannot find it, with instructions to publish if we die. Is it, she asked, hidden that way? Not yet, I admitted. But they do not know that. The door burst open. 3 men stood silhouetted against the lamplight from the hallway. One wore the insignia of a military captain. The others looked like scholars, but they carried themselves like fighters. Mei Lin, the captain said, "We have been seeking you for some time. You have something that does not belong to you." I stood slowly, the manuscript still clutched against my chest. Li Mingzhu rose beside me. "I have something that belongs to history," I said, pleased that my voice did not shake. "And history will have it, one way or another." "Give us the manuscript," one of the scholars said, "and we will let you live. You can return to your studies, forget any of this happened. We seek only to protect the legacy of a great man." "A great poet," I corrected, "not a great man. There is a difference." The scholar's face darkened. "The manuscript is a forgery. Lies meant to besmirch." "The manuscript is in Li Bai's own hand," I interrupted. "And it has been authenticated by experts. Copies of their assessments have been sent to multiple locations. If you kill me, if you kill Li Mingzhu here, if you destroy this manuscript, the assessments will be published, and the truth will out anyway. You will only make martyrs of us and add credibility to Li Bai's confession." This was a lie, but I said it with conviction. The men exchanged glances. "You are bluffing," the captain said, but uncertainty edged his voice. "Am I?" I met his eyes. "Are you willing to bet your governor's position on that? Because if we die and the assessments are published, everyone will know that the governor ordered our murders to suppress the truth. That will destroy not only Li Bai's legacy, but the governor's as well." Li Mingzhu picked up the thread smoothly. "However," she said, "we are not unreasonable. We understand the delicacy of the situation. We are willing to negotiate." "What do you want?" the captain asked warily. "Safe passage to the capital," I said, "and an audience with the third minister of rights. We will present our case to him and abide by his decision regarding the manuscript's disposition." "The third minister is no friend to our governor," one of the scholars objected. "Precisely," Li Mingzhu said, "which is why you should agree to our terms. If you refuse and we die, the assessments are published and your governor is destroyed. If you agree and the third minister decides to publish the manuscript, your governor is merely weakened, his scholarly authority questioned, but his political position potentially salvageable. And if the third minister decides the manuscript should be hidden, which is possible, as he is a thoughtful man who understands nuance, then you lose nothing and gain the certainty that the truth will not emerge." I could see them calculating, weighing risks and benefits. Finally, the captain said, "I must consult with the governor." "Do so quickly," I said. "We leave for the capital tomorrow at dawn, with or without your safe passage. With it, we travel quietly and present ourselves properly to the third minister. Without it, we travel in disguise and spread word of our mission to every scholar and official we meet along the way." Imagine how many copies of the manuscript might circulate before we reach the capital if we take that route. Another lie. We had no such copies. But fear is a powerful motivator, and I could see it working on these men. "Wait here," the captain said. He turned and left, the 2 scholars following. We heard them descending the stairs rapidly, heard horses departing. Li Mingzhu let out a shaky breath. "That was well done," she said. "But you realize we have committed ourselves to a course with no escape. If they call our bluff, if they decide to kill us anyway and deal with the consequences." "Then we die," I said simply. "But at least we die having tried." That is more than Master Chen had. We spent the rest of the night preparing. Li Mingzhu revealed that she had brought money, enough to fund our journey and bribe guards if necessary. I wrote a letter to the third minister, explaining everything, the manuscript, Li Bai's confession, Master Chen's story, and our proposal. I made 2 copies, sealing them with wax we bought from the innkeeper. As dawn broke, the captain returned. He looked exhausted, as if he had ridden through the night, which perhaps he had. "The governor agrees to your terms," he said stiffly. You will have safe passage to the capital and an introduction to the third minister's household. In exchange, you will speak to no one of the manuscript until you have met with him. Agreed, I said. And if the third minister decides the manuscript should be destroyed, then we will abide by that decision, Li Mingju said, on condition that a full and accurate biography of Chen Tao is commissioned and published, acknowledging his skills as poet and administrator, and that Yunxia's story is told with respect and dignity. The captain's jaw tightened. The governor will not agree to that. It is too much. It is the minimum, I said. The third minister will likely demand far more. We are offering the governor a chance to control the narrative before someone else does it for him. After another long pause, the captain nodded curtly. I will convey your terms. You will wait here until I return with the governor's final answer. He left again. Li Mingju and I sat together in the growing morning light, exhausted but too nervous to sleep. We spoke little, both lost in our own thoughts. When the captain returned in the afternoon, he brought a sealed letter from the governor. Li Mingju broke the seal and read aloud. I agree to your terms under protest. You will be provided with horses, guards, and traveling papers to ensure safe passage to the capital. In exchange for your silence until you meet with the third minister, I will commission a scholar to research Chen Tao's life and works. If the third minister decides in our favor regarding the manuscript, this biography will be published with full scholarly apparatus. If he decides against us, I wash my hands of the entire affair. These terms are not negotiable. He is trying to minimize his commitment, Li Mingju said. The biography only gets published if we lose. But he has acknowledged that Chen Tao deserves a biography, I pointed out. That is something, and once the research is done, once scholars have looked into Master Chen's life, they will find the truth of his character regardless of whether the governor publishes it. Knowledge, once created, has a way of spreading. She smiled. You are learning to think like a politician. I am learning to think like someone who wishes to survive and do some good in the process, I said. There is a difference. We departed that evening, accompanied by 6 guards who watched us with suspicious eyes, but made no threatening moves. The journey to the capital took 2 weeks, through autumn countryside painted in shades of red and gold. It should have been beautiful, but I could barely see it. My mind was consumed with what would come next. The third minister of rites received us in a private garden within the imperial complex. He was older than I expected, perhaps 60, with a scholar's stoop and ink-stained fingers. But his eyes were sharp, and he listened to our story without interruption, his expression revealing nothing. When we finished, he asked to see the manuscript. I handed it to him with trembling hands. He read it slowly, carefully, taking nearly an hour to go through the entire document. Li Mingju and I sat in silence, watching his face for any reaction. Finally, he set the manuscript down and looked at us. This is authentic, he said. I knew Li Bai slightly, corresponded with him a few times. This is his hand, his voice. The confession is genuine. What will you do with it? I asked. He smiled slightly. You have placed me in a difficult position, young lady. On one hand, I am a seeker of truth. The historian in me wants to publish this immediately, to correct the record, to ensure that Li Bai is remembered accurately. On the other hand, I am a politician. I understand the value of secrets, of leverage, of tactical silence. And on a third hand, if I may borrow one, I am a lover of poetry. I have memorized Li Bai's verses. They have brought me comfort in dark times, and I find I am reluctant to poison that comfort, even knowing what I now know. 3 hands is one too many, Li Mingju said softly. You must choose which to act with. So I must, he agreed, but perhaps the choice is not as binary as you believe. Tell me, what do you truly want from this manuscript? Revenge against a dead man, justice for the wronged, or something else? I want Master Chen to be remembered, I said, not as Li Bai's rival or victim, but as himself. A good man, a skilled poet, a just administrator. I want his daughter to be able to speak of him with pride. I want Yunxia's suffering to mean something. And you? He asked Li Mingju. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where women can study poetry without shame, she said. Where we are judged by our talent, not our gender. Where truth matters but does not become a weapon to destroy all beauty. The third minister nodded slowly. Then perhaps we can find a path that serves all these goals. I propose this. I will keep the manuscript in my personal archive. It will not be published, not now and perhaps not ever. But its existence will be known to certain people, scholars I trust, officials who value truth, historians who must know the full context. They will be sworn to secrecy, but they will know. What good does that do? I asked. It does this. Li Bai's work will be taught, but it will be taught with nuance. Scholars will note that his poetry often deals with themes of betrayal and guilt. They will speculate about personal demons that drove him. They will acknowledge that genius and goodness are not synonymous. And when students ask why we can separate the art from the artist, we will have thoughtful answers prepared. Not lies, but not the full brutal truth either. A middle path. And Master Chen? Li Mingju asked. I will personally commission a thorough biography. More, I will ensure that his surviving poems are collected and published with commentary by the finest scholars. I will arrange for his descendants, which includes you, Li Mingju, to receive stipends in recognition of his service to the empire. And I will make certain that in all discussions of Li Bai's era, Chen Tao is mentioned as an important figure in his own right, not merely a footnote. That is generous, I said cautiously. What do you want in exchange? He smiled. Your silence, of course, and something more. I want you both to become part of my network of scholar reformers. Li Mingju, I understand you have been advocating for women's education. I can provide funding and political protection for schools that accept female students. Mei Lin, I understand you are a skilled calligrapher and devoted student. I can arrange for you to study at the Imperial Academy, perhaps even to tutor young women who wish to learn. Women cannot attend the Imperial Academy, I said. Not openly, he agreed. But there are ways around such rules for those with the right connections. You will study privately with Academy Masters, under my sponsorship. And in time, and when we have built enough support, we will petition the Emperor to formalize women's access to education. It may take years, even decades. But it will happen. Li Mingju and I looked at each other. This was far more than we had hoped for. Too much, perhaps. There had to be a catch. Why? I asked bluntly. Why would you do all this for us? The third minister's smile faded. He looked old suddenly and tired, because I too have made compromises with truth. I too have kept secrets that perhaps should have been revealed. And I have seen how those secrets eat at the soul, how they corrupt even our good intentions. If I can help you find a better path, one that serves truth without destroying beauty, that protects the vulnerable without punishing the innocent admirers of a guilty man's art, then perhaps I can believe that my own compromises have been worthwhile. He stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking out at the capital sprawling below us. I am 63 years old. I have perhaps 10 good years left, maybe less. I want to spend them building something that will outlast me, not monuments to my own glory, but structures that will help others. Schools for women, reforms to the examination system, a culture where truth is valued but mercy is also practiced. This manuscript, he gestured to it lying on the table. This can be a foundation stone for that work, not despite its difficult truths, but because of them. We accept your offer, Li Mingju said quietly. I nodded agreement. Good, he said. Then let us seal this pact properly. I will write out the terms of our agreement and we will all sign. Copies will be held by my most trusted associates. If I die before the work is done, they will continue it. If you die, your successors will be provided for. This will be a multi-generational project. Are you prepared for that? Yes, I said, though the weight of that commitment settled heavily on my shoulders. Another burden to carry across years. But perhaps this burden would bear fruit rather than simply consuming those who carried it. We spent the next 3 hours working out the details. The third minister was precise in his language, making sure every term was clear, every contingency planned for. As we worked, I found myself respecting him more and more. This was not a man who sought easy answers or simple solutions. He understood complexity, embraced it even, and tried to work within it rather than against it. When the documents were finally complete and signed, he poured wine for each of us. A toast, he said, to truth and beauty, and to finding ways to honor both. We drank. The wine was excellent, smooth and warm. I felt some of the tension that had gripped me for months finally beginning to ease. One more thing, the third minister said. The manuscript itself. It should not remain in the capital. Too many people would seek to steal or destroy it. I propose we divide it into 3 parts. One part I will keep, secured in a location known only to me and my successor. One part Li Mingzhu will keep, to be passed to her daughter and eventually her daughter's daughter. And one part Mei Lin will keep, to be passed to her students across the generations. That way, no single person can destroy the truth, but neither can it be easily revealed without the agreement of all 3 lineages. Like a check and balance system, Li Mingzhu said thoughtfully, each part useless without the others. Precisely, and each keeper will be responsible for teaching the next generation why the truth is being held in reserve, what purposes it serves, and what dangers would come from premature revelation. The burden must be passed on with full understanding. That is wise, I agreed. But we should also create a 4th copy, sealed and hidden in a location none of us know. Something for true emergencies, if all 3 lineages somehow fail or are corrupted. The third minister nodded approvingly. Better and better. You think like a strategist, Mei Lin. Yes, let us create a 4th copy. I know of a monastery in the western mountains, very remote, where the monks specialize in preserving ancient texts. I will have the copy sent there, with instructions that it is to be opened only if a formal request comes from the Ministry of Rites, citing a specific code phrase. That way, even if we all die, even if our lineages end, the truth remains recoverable by those who come after and need it. We spent another day arranging the details. The manuscript was carefully copied by the third minister's personal scribe, a trusted man who had served him for 30 years and who swore an oath of secrecy. Each copy was sealed in a waterproof case and prepared for transport. When it came time to separate, the third minister gave us each a jade token marked with his personal seal. Show this to any official in the empire, he said. It will grant you safe passage and whatever assistance you require. You are under my protection now, and through me, the emperor's protection. Anyone who threatens you threatens the imperial will. Li Mingzhu and I bowed deeply. We will honor your trust, she said. See that you do, he replied, and see that you live well. The best way to honor those who suffered is not to dwell in their suffering, but to build the better world they dreamed of. Raise your children, teach your students, write beautiful things. Let that be the legacy that endures. We departed the capital 2 days later. Li Mingzhu returned to her home in the south, where her daughter waited. I remained in the capital, taking up residence in a small house the third minister had arranged for me, and began my studies with the imperial masters. The years that followed were full and rich. I studied calligraphy, poetry, history, and philosophy. I taught other young women, carefully selected students who showed both talent and discretion. Some of them went on to become respected scholars in their own right, though always under male names or working through male proxies. The system had not yet changed enough to allow them full recognition, but they were making contributions nonetheless. Li Mingzhu and I corresponded regularly. Long letters full of discussion about poetry and politics, about the challenges of balancing truth and beauty, about how to raise the next generation to understand the complexities we had inherited. Her daughter grew into a remarkable young woman, a poet of genuine talent who eventually published a collection under a pseudonym that became moderately famous. The third minister kept his word. Chen Tao's biography was published to respectful reviews. It did not become a celebrated work. There was not enough dramatic material, I suppose, but it ensured that Master Chen was remembered as he deserved. Scholars began to seek out his surviving poems and include them in anthologies. He would never be as famous as Li Bai, but he was no longer forgotten. And Li Bai's poems continued to be taught and celebrated, but with a new undertone of awareness. Scholars began to write about the darkness in his work, the themes of guilt and betrayal that ran through so many of his verses. They speculated about personal troubles, about inner demons. They taught students to appreciate the art while acknowledging that the artist had been flawed. Not the full truth, but closer to it than the hagiography that had come before. The third minister lived another 12 years, long enough to see many of his reforms take root. Women began to be admitted to certain schools, though in limited numbers. The examination system was revised to place less emphasis on rote memorization and more on original thinking. When he died, his successor, a woman named Wu Mei, who had been one of the first female students to study under imperial masters, continued his work with even greater vigor. I often thought about Master Chen during those years, about how he had carried the burden of knowledge alone for so long, unable to decide what to do with it, about how he had tried to pass that burden to me, hoping I would be wiser than he had been. I do not know if I was wiser. I only know that I tried to find a path that served truth without destroying beauty, that honored suffering without perpetuating it. Sometimes, late at night, I would take out my portion of Li Bai's manuscript and read it. The words never became easier to bear. The confession of cruelty, the admission of calculated evil, the casual way Li Bai described destroying lives, it always made me feel ill. But I never regretted keeping it hidden, because I came to understand what Master Chen had meant when he said that great art survives. Li Bai's poems were beautiful, and that beauty had brought comfort and inspiration to thousands of people. To reveal the full truth would not undo the evil he had done. Chen Tao and Yunxia would still have suffered, their lives still destroyed, but it would poison the comfort those poems had brought to people who bore no responsibility for Li Bai's crimes. That was the calculus I lived with, the balance I tried to maintain. The truth held in reserve, a deterrent against those who would make Li Bai into a saint, but not weaponized to destroy the good his art had nevertheless accomplished. I grew old. My students became teachers themselves, and their students after them. The portion of the manuscript I held was passed to a young woman named Qing Lian, who reminded me so much of my younger self that it made my heart ache. I told her everything, made sure she understood not just the facts, but the philosophy behind our choices. She listened with the same intense focus I had once brought to Master Chen's stories, and I knew the burden was passing into capable hands. Li Mingju and I met one last time, when we were both in our 70s. She traveled to the capital specifically for this meeting, though her health was failing. We sat in my garden, drinking tea and watching the plum blossoms fall. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked. It was the same question we had asked ourselves 100 times over the years, in letters and conversations. "I think we made a choice we could live with," I said. "That is perhaps all anyone can hope for." "My granddaughter has her portion of the manuscript now," she said. "She is a fierce girl, full of opinions about justice and truth. She wanted to publish it immediately when I told her the story. I had to explain carefully why we chose otherwise." "Did you convince her?" "I convinced her to wait," Li Mingju said, "to think deeply before acting, to consider who is helped and who is harmed by revelation. That is the best I could hope for. Each generation must make its own decision." "As it should be," I agreed. "We cannot bind the future too tightly. We can only give them the tools to think and the knowledge to choose wisely." She smiled. "You sound like the third minister." I learned from the best. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the blossoms fall like snow. After a while, Li Mingju said, "Do you ever wonder what Li Bai would think if he could see what became of his confession? How we used it not to destroy him but to build something better?" "I think he would hate it," I said. "He wanted to be remembered purely for his genius. To have even a few scholars aware of his darker nature would have enraged him. But he is dead, and the dead do not get to control their legacies. The living do, and we have shaped his legacy into something that serves the world better than his vanity ever could have. A final victory over him," she said softly. "No," I corrected. "Not a victory, a transcendence. We moved beyond the question of who won and who lost. We moved beyond revenge and vindication. We simply asked, what can we build from these ruins? And then we built it." Li Mingju reached over and took my hand. Hers was papery and thin, spotted with age, but her grip was still strong. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding my mother's pain, for honoring my father's memory, for helping me find a path I could walk without shame." "Thank you," I replied, "for showing me that compromise is not always cowardice, that mercy can be radical, that sometimes the bravest choice is not to reveal the truth but to hold it in trust." She died 2 months later, peacefully in her sleep. I attended her funeral and met her granddaughter, who looked at me with eyes full of questions she was too polite to ask. I gave her my jade token from the third minister, passed down through his successors and still honored throughout the empire. You are a keeper now, I told her, of truth, of secrets, of the burden and the blessing. Carry it well. I will, she promised, and I believed her. I lived another 5 years after Li Mingju's death, long enough to see Wu Mei, the third minister's successor, open the first official imperial academy for women, long enough to see Chen Tao's poetry anthologized alongside Li Bai's in a collection of Tang Dynasty masters, long enough to see my own students become respected teachers, pushing slowly but steadily for greater recognition of women's scholarship. As I approached my own death, I sometimes thought about that night in the inn, when the soldiers came and Li Mingju appeared, and we made our desperate gamble. So much had hung on that moment, on our ability to think clearly under pressure, on our willingness to compromise without surrendering our principles. We had been so young, Li Mingju and I, not in years perhaps, but in understanding. We had thought the world was simpler than it was, that truth was always the answer, that justice was straightforward. We had learned otherwise. We had learned that truth is complicated, that justice often requires mercy, that the right path is rarely the obvious one. On my final day, Qinglian sat with me. I was lucid still, though my body was failing. She held my hand and asked the question I knew she would ask, the question each generation asks the one before. Was it worth it, she said. Hiding the truth, carrying this burden, did it accomplish anything, or did we simply become accomplices in Li Bai's crimes by helping to preserve his reputation? I smiled. I had asked Master Chen the same question once, and he had not been able to answer. But I had lived longer than he had, seen more of the consequences of our choices. Look around you, I said to Qinglian. Women study in imperial academies. Female poets publish under their own names. Scholars debate whether art can be separated from the artist, and they do so with nuance and care. The world is not perfect, but it is better. And we helped make it so, not by destroying Li Bai's legacy, but by using its existence as leverage to build something new. But the truth is still hidden, she protested. Some truths must be hidden, I said. Not forever, perhaps, but for now. The manuscript still exists. Your generation, or the one after that. Someday, someone will decide the world is ready for the full story. That is not our decision to make. We can only prepare the ground, create a world where the truth can be received with wisdom rather than used as a weapon. How will we know when the time is right? You will know, I said, when Li Bai's reputation is secure enough that the truth cannot destroy the good his art has done. When women are equal enough that revealing his crimes against Yunxia will not be used as an argument against women's education. When poetry is respected enough that one poet's evil will not taint the entire art form. When all those conditions are met, then perhaps the time will have come. That could be centuries from now, she said. Then it is centuries from now, I agreed. Truth is patient. It can wait. Those were the last words I spoke with full clarity. I drifted in and out of consciousness for another day, and then I died as Master Chen had died, peacefully, having said what needed to be said, leaving the burden in capable hands. They tell me my funeral was well attended. Students I had taught, scholars whose work I had supported, women who had benefited from the reforms we had fought for. Qinglian gave a eulogy in which she called me a guardian of truth and a builder of futures. She did not mention the manuscript. That secret was still held close. But she spoke of my dedication to both beauty and justice, to the hard work of finding paths between competing goods. The manuscript passed on. Qinglian held it for 40 years before passing it to her student. That student held it for 30 before the chain was broken by war and upheaval. The third minister's copy survived, hidden in the imperial archives. Li Mingju's copy passed through her family line and exists still, I am told, though I am long past knowing such things. And the fourth copy, the one sent to the remote monastery, remains there even now, waiting. The monks who guard it do not know what it contains. They know only that it is important, that it must be preserved, that someday someone will come with the right questions and the right authority, and it will be opened. Perhaps that day has come by the time you read this. Perhaps you are the one who has unsealed the archives, found the scattered pieces. assembled the full story. If so, then the time must finally be right. The world must finally be ready. Or perhaps more time is still needed. Perhaps you are reading this and thinking, as we thought, that the revelation would do more harm than good, that the beautiful poems should be allowed to stand unburdened by the darkness of their creator, that some truths are best held in trust. I cannot tell you what to choose. Each generation must make its own decision, must weigh its own calculations of justice and mercy, truth and beauty. I can only tell you what we chose and why, and hope that our choices inform yours without binding them. We chose to believe that beauty matters, even when created by flawed hands. We chose to believe that truth matters, even when hidden. We chose to believe that the future could be better than the past, and we dedicated our lives to building that future. If you are reading this in a world where women are truly equal, where art is judged on its merits rather than on the character of its creator, where nuance and complexity are valued over simple narratives, then our work was not in vain. And perhaps, in such a world, Li Bai's full truth can finally be told without poisoning all the good that came after. Or perhaps not. Perhaps even in such a world, there are reasons to hold some truths in reserve. I do not know. I am dead. And the dead are poor advisors for the living. What I do know is this: truth and beauty are not enemies, though they sometimes seem to be. They are partners in the endless dance of human meaning-making. Sometimes truth must lead, and beauty must follow. Sometimes beauty must lead, and truth must wait its turn. The art is in knowing which is which, when to reveal and when to conceal, when to speak and when to hold silence. Master Chen died not knowing the answer. I died believing I had found one answer, but not the only answer. And you, reading this across whatever distance of time separates us, must find your own answer still. That is the burden and the blessing. Each generation must choose for itself. Each generation must look at the ruins left by the past and decide what to build from them. Each generation must weigh truth against beauty, justice against mercy, revelation against discretion. We gave you the tools to choose wisely. We gave you the knowledge to understand what is at stake. We gave you the example of our choices, flawed and compromised though they may have been. The rest is up to you. Choose well. And when you pass this burden to the next generation, as you must, teach them not what to choose, but how to choose. Teach them to think deeply, to consider consequences, to value both truth and beauty. Teach them that there are no perfect answers, only better and worse compromises. Teach them to be humble about their certainty and courageous about their doubts. And teach them to honor those who suffered, Chen Tao and Yunxia, whose lives were destroyed by one man's ambition and cruelty. They are the reason this story matters, not Li Bai with his brilliant poems and terrible deeds. Remember the victims. Let their suffering mean something. Let it teach us to be better than those who harmed them. That is my final wish, passed down through the years to whoever now reads these words. Remember the gentle poet who loved by a river and lost everything. Remember the scholar's daughter who was deceived and suffered and endured. Remember that behind every great artistic legacy are ordinary people whose lives were touched, shaped, sometimes destroyed by the artist's genius and darkness. Remember them not as victims frozen in their suffering, but as full human beings who loved and dreamed and tried to build good lives despite the obstacles placed before them. That is the truest memorial, the most lasting justice. The sun is setting on the river where 3 young people once sat composing poetry. The willows still bend in the wind, brushing water like calligraphy brushes painting liquid silk. Voices still call to each other across the current, young and hopeful, not knowing what the future holds. Let them call, let them dream, let them create beauty, even if they are flawed. And when they stumble, when they fail, when they hurt others in their striving, let us be there with truth and mercy both, ready to hold them accountable, while also helping them build something better from the ruins. That is all any of us can do. Build and teach the next builders, and hope that each generation adds something of value to the foundation we have laid. Truth and beauty, justice and mercy, revelation and discretion, all of them tools in the endless work of making a world worth living in. The story ends where all true stories end, not with answers, but with questions. Not with resolution, but with continuation. Not with the death of the old, but with the promise of the new. Choose well, build well, and when your time comes to pass the burden on, do so with wisdom and trust, knowing that the work continues long after any individual worker has laid down their tools. That is enough. That must be enough. The river flows on, indifferent to all our striving, carrying away our words even as we speak them. But for a moment, for the brief span of a human life, we can make marks on the water, patterns that catch the light before they fade. That is all we are, all we have ever been. Make your mark, make it count, and then let it go.